What's going on? What's going on, everybody? It's been a minute since I've made one of these educational DeFi videos. The other day, I posted the different stages of learning DeFi, at least something similar to my path of learning DeFi. I'm kind of curious where you guys stop in these different stages and which ones are actually interesting to you if you end up watching this video all the way through. I'm going to try to go over each and every single one of these under 1 minute so that this video isn't taking too long. Feel free to skip over. I'll put the chapters on the ones that are most interesting to you. I do feel the general audience, the general crypto audience is familiar with the first two stages. I do think some DeFi interested active users go all the way to stage 5 when we have perps and prediction markets. I think the DeFi savvy people get to stage 6 and 7. And I really think the cutting edge DeFi trenchers, the DeFi nerds, are in 8 and 9. So let's go over them real quick and let's get started with the first one. So first one is swaps. I think this is what most people learn pretty quickly. You have a certain amount of tokens, let's say USDC. Here I have 25 cents and I want to buy 10 cents of Ethereum. I can click this, I swap it, I own some Ethereum. I hope Ethereum moves up in price, which has taken a while. And then I could swap it back to US dollars and hopefully make some profit. Pretty simple. Uniswap is the OG on Ethereum, and Radium is one of the largest, if not the largest, on Solana. Same kind of deal, except here they show you a chart so you can kind of track the price movements a little more. That's swaps. Next is staking. Staking is a little interesting because now almost everything is staking. I do feel the original OG staking was with Lido and staked ETH. But as an example, I'm going to show you guys Lombard because they have staked Bitcoin. And it's an interesting concept, but I like them, so I'm going to use them as an example. What you do is you own a certain asset. This could be Bitcoin, this could be ETH, this could be Solana, this could be a whole bunch of stuff. You lock it for a certain period of time and you're earning a reward. The largest staking protocol on Solana is Jito. So I'll use an example here. If you were to stake your SOL, you would earn some Jito SOL, which is, we won't get into liquid staking tokens, but you earn some Jito SOL and you're earning 5%. You're basically getting some of the Solana that's emitted from validators and other things to earn a little bit. Usually when you do staking, there is some kind of lock period, but some of them have free unlock periods that you can do at any time. So it's just an extra way to earn. Pretty simple. Lock your stuff, earn a little more. Next up, we have LPing. So this brings us back into swaps because LPing is what powers swaps to happen. So this is going into the other side or deeper into DeFi when you're now providing the assets for people to swap between. Now I'm going to use Project X as an example because I like their UI. So here we have Hype and USDC. So these are the two pairs that you can swap between. And instead of you swapping, again, you're providing Hype and USDC so other people can swap. Now, mostly, this is a little tidbit, most regular dexes, you provide the full range. So right now, Hype is trading around $43. And let me see if normally when you just provide liquidity, they ask for 50-50 and you like provide the full range of if Hype goes to 0 or if Hype goes to, a bajillion dollars. With concentrated liquidity, you can actually choose the range that you want your assets to be provided for. And so here, for example, I have if Hype goes down to 40 or if it goes up to $50. The reason I would want to do this is instead of spreading my liquidity, my tokens across the whole bar, let's say I had $100 and it spread, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 across the bar, I can squeeze it in together so that it's like 30, 30, 30, but it's only in this section. So I could then, in this case, get 3 times as much rewards because my rewards come from people trading in this range. So as other people are swapping from stage 1, I'm earning a little bit of the fees every time that happens. So if I'm good at picking a range and there's a lot of swap happening, I can earn a juicy APY. As you see, if I tighten the range, the APY, the estimated APY goes higher. So typically you do have to enter it 50-50, but with this concentrated liquidity, it adjusts depending on your range, but usually it is around 50-50. There's different strategies for that, but that's providing liquidity and you could always take it out after. There's a thing called impermanent loss, but that's not for this video. Next one is lending. Now lending is kind of fun because it kind of feels like staking as far as an experience, but something else is happening. So I'm going to give it to the big old OGs, Aave, for lending. All you're really doing is supplying your assets. You're dropping them into a lending platform. They get lent out to people that are paying for it. So let's say I was to lend out my ETH. Here I would earn 1.6% for letting other people borrow my ETH. If you look on the other end, people borrowing ETH is for 2%. I'm earning 1.6%. That difference is what Aave is earning for the most part. So they're just being the middleman for letting you lend out your asset and for other people to borrow yours. Continnue, not the Solstice Mark, is the Solana version of credit market, so borrowing and lending. Except what's a little unique with theirs is that they have separated markets. On Aave, it's kind of all pooled together, what you're borrowing and lending. Here, they have them, what's the right word? Fractionalized? I'm not sure if that's the right word, but they have separate, independent, individual markets. And with that, you actually get different rates. So the same asset, like USDC, you could be earning 6% if you're using it in the prime market, or 3% if you're using it in the main Continnue market. So it's kind of cool when there are individual markets, there might be more or less demand for the same tokens. So that does bring a unique twist. But at the end of the day, you are giving your assets for other people to borrow and earning a fee from them for letting them do so. Next up is Perps and prediction markets. We're going to try to get both of these in. Perps, I mean, I got to bring it to Hyperliquid. So this is technically EVM. Perps is probably the one thing where you're probably going to lose the most money learning if you're going to get into Perps. It can be very high risk, high reward. It is for most people. Essentially, you deposit some funds in here and you can decide to long or short a market. Now, if you're longing or shorting with more than the money that you've deposited, then you're actually in the background borrowing some money to get in that position. For example, if I have $1,000, with Perps, I can actually buy $2,000 of Bitcoin with my $1,000. That would be considered a 2x leverage, where I put up my $1,000, long Bitcoin, and I borrow $1,000 to also long Bitcoin. And in that case, if Bitcoin goes up 10%, instead of earning $100 from my 1,000, I earn 200 because I now also have this borrowed 1,000. So I have 2,000 of capital, earning 10% is 200. And I can get the $200 and then return the borrowed $1,000 when I close the position. The thing is, there is fees for borrowing, so I would not get the full 200. I'd maybe get 195 depending on how long the trade went. But in essence, I can amplify my exposure. This also happens the other way around. Another cool thing with Perps is that you can open short positions. And I think that the toughest part is understanding how a short works. And I think that the best way I can describe it is instead of borrowing money to go long, it's the opposite way, where you borrow the asset, you sell it at a certain price, hope the price drops, buy back the asset so that you can return it. Let's use an example. Let's say Bitcoin is at $100,000. I borrow one Bitcoin from you. I go sell it for $100,000. I pray Bitcoin drops to $50,000. Then I rebuy it at $50,000, give you back your Bitcoin and keep the difference. That's essentially what shorting is. You can do that with Perps, especially on Hyperliquid and a lot of other places. So it's a lot more technical, it's a lot more tricky, but it has a big market, has good upside potential if you get into it over the long term. Again, I think most people lose in Perps anyways. Prediction markets is kind of cool. I won't get too technical with it because I think it's meant to be not so technical, but you can bet on the outcome of something, either yes or no, or like certain numbers or different things. It's betting in a sense, in a different way. It's predicting, but with money attached to it. The cool thing for this is essentially most things, let's say they start at a 50-50 chance. Let's say you have a soccer game, but it's the best team versus the worst team. So you know it's not 50-50. You think maybe it's more 90-10. So you see the 50-50 chance. You buy the 50 to the best team. And if they win, that 50 goes to $1, goes to 100%. So you double your money. If they lose, you lose all your money. But as more and more people buy one side, the odds also change. So initially, it might show 50-50, but if everybody bets on the winning team, that 50 goes to 55, 60, 75, 90. And then the split is more 90-10, maybe how it should be. And so the chances of winning some money get smaller. and the chances of losing money if you're on the other side also get smaller. So it's a bit of a balance, but there is an actual order book behind the scenes where people are putting prices of what they would be willing to buy and sell. So somebody would be willing here to sell a 75-cent chance. Somebody wants to buy a 74-cent chance as well. So there's a bit of an order book behind there, but I won't get too much into that. That is prediction markets. It's for sports, crypto, politics, and a whole bunch of things, and it is growing in popularity with this betting scene that is growing. Damn, I'm over 10 minutes. Okay, we continue looping. So I would say after this part is where most people are. We're going to get into 6 to 9. We're going to get into collateralized borrowing. So collateralized borrowing is another step, but it's related to lending, although it's on the other side. So collateralized borrowing, we're going to revisit Aave. Instead of being on this side, we're now going to be on this side of the equation. So if I wanted to borrow some Ethereum, let's say, I would have to deposit some collateral. All collateral really means is borrow some assets that somebody can hold while I do the borrowing. So if I have, again, 1 Bitcoin at 100K, I let you hold that, you let me borrow $5,000. The collateral is there is if I don't bring back this money, the collateral could be sold to pay back the lender. So collateralized borrowing, I think it's really cool. I think is a big feature of Bitcoin that's growing. So there are different platforms where you can do that, not just for Bitcoin, but for just about any other asset. If you have something of value in crypto, there might be some places where you can borrow money if you let people hold it. Oh yeah, just to show, like Aave is a great place. Camino is actually a great place. I do have a borrowing position right now open in the Solstice market. As you can see, I've put up $10,000 worth of this, $27,000 worth of this, and I've been able to borrow $25,000 at 67% borrowing rate, which is extremely cheap. So there are some cool things you can do, and it is a form of leverage. If you think about it, that is very similar to Perps if you really break it down, but it's, I find, a little easier to manage on my end. That's collateralized borrowing. And to continue, looping fits the same way. So if we go back to that Camino market, you see I have $35,000 of assets here. I've borrowed $25,000. If I was to swap this into this asset, I could then put it back in and borrow some more money. Let me give you an example. If I give you $100 of Bitcoin, you let me borrow $20 cash. I go buy some more Bitcoin. I let you hold it. Now you have 120 of my Bitcoin, and you let me borrow another $10. I go buy Bitcoin. I add it to the stack 130. You let me borrow another 5. I add it to stack 135. So I've increased my exposure to Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, I need to give you back all the money I borrowed. And in this case, it was like 20, 10, 5. So it was $35 I eventually have to give back to you. But if Bitcoin's price goes up, then there's less that I need to sell to give back to you. So it's essentially looping. I actually do have a looping position. Sometimes I do it manually, but there are some pretty cool places, Camino included. They have a multiply section that does the looping for you. But there's also great platforms like Loopscale that show you the pairs and they do the leverage for you. The leverage is just basically how many times it's looped over. Here it's on YC and borrowing USDC to do the looping. A cool thing that they have here is that sometimes you can get some rates at a fixed duration, which is a big bonus for loopers so that you're not too worried about watching the different borrowing rates go up. All right, we're gonna get to the last section. And for the last section, you might need your glasses if you have any. This is going very long, so if you're this far, thank you for watching. If you've skipped this far, well, welcome. So next is rate swaps. Now, rate swaps, I have a whole video explaining how PTs and YTs work, but there are two platforms for rate swaps. There's Exponent on Solana, which they have a V2 coming that looks elite. I've seen it, of course, in background. And then there's Pendle for Ethereum. So I'm just going to try to break this down as simple as possible. What these platforms both do, they find a yield-bearing asset, they attach time to it, which is an important component, and then with that, they can actually strip, or they can split the asset into its core asset, the underlying asset, and its yield. and people can buy on both sides. Now you might wonder, why would somebody want to buy a core asset when they could just buy it maybe regularly? Like, why go through all this trouble? Or why would somebody want to buy yield? As simple as I can think about it, once it's wrapped in time, it changes its component a little bit. If you look at all these platforms, there is something called a maturity, and that is when the time essentially ends. But anyways, with that element, when you split it into its two parts, the core and the yield, buying the core, you actually get it at a discount. So all these assets, if you're buying just the core aspect of it, you can actually get a discount on what its real value is, because it's almost, in a sense, frozen in time until the time runs out. You're getting a discount, but you don't get the full asset until the end of the time. That's why there's the discount. And on the yield side, you are speculating, for the most part, this is the riskier side, you are paying up front to collect the yield for the remaining time. So in this example, I think OnYC is a great example. There's about 13, I'm going to say 12% APY of yield. Let's say it's for 10 months. So with $100, you are at $12. You can maybe pay $10 up front to hopefully collect that yield every single day, in hopes that that yield is higher by the end of the 10 months, whatever I said, than what you paid. So you're paying up front to collect yield over time. And why I think OnYC is a great example is because its yield fluctuates quite a lot. They're a reinsurance protocol, so they have different insurance contracts with different yields. So in this case, if you bought YT when it was very cheap, when it was like projected at 5%, you might have paid, let's say, $50 for a YT to collect it, let's say, for the rest of the year. If the yield spikes, then you're actually just collecting more money than what you initially paid for. But again, it gets a little crazy, but that's essentially the idea. I would wait for Exponent V2 because display-wise, it's a lot easier to see. And the final one, which is what I'm slowly getting into, I don't know too much of it going on in the space right now, but things are definitely popping up, is tranching. So with this one, I like to explain it as a built-in insurance system. So I'm going to use Royco as an example. They recently launched, I don't know, well, they have some decent TVL. What essentially it does is it takes a yield-bearing asset or product and it divides it into two different sections, the junior tranche and the senior tranche. And why I call it a built-in insurance is that the junior tranche, if anything happens to the asset or its yield, like let's say it underperforms and it goes negative, or, you know, God forbid, a hack happens, the junior tranche takes all the hits and the senior tranche gets protected by the junior tranche. So if there was $1 million and it was split exactly in half at 500K and 500K in the junior and the senior, and there was a 100K hack, right? The junior would absorb the 100K completely and the senior would go untouched. So by being in the senior tranche, you're protected. That's why I call it like a built-in insurance by the junior tranche. But in return, the junior tranche earns more yield than the senior tranche. It's almost like the seniors, depending on the balance, are giving up some of their yield to the juniors for that protection. So I think this is really cool because as more assets get more and more sophisticated, some people might have a lot of capital, but they need that protection, so they're going to go the senior tranche route. Some people will have full bullishness on the yield and the strategy and the risk of the asset, and they will go the junior tranche, willing to take the hit if anything bad happens for more yields. So this is something really cool because even this can get split into more things. Somebody can get into a senior tranche, feel really safe, feel secured, put it on a lending protocol, then borrow from it, then loop, then, you know, then also PT, YT it. I mean, it can go absolutely nuts when you get to this level of DeFi and you know all the other steps before it. We're just reaching 20 minutes, which is twice as long as I expected. But if you've made it this far, congratulations. Each of these can have their own individual video, but of course I won't bore you guys with that. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please drop them below. If I ever do make individual videos, I do take your guys' feedbacks and questions when I make them. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Talk to you soon. Cheers.